All right, there we go. There's the link. And so I'm going to do a short introduction quick for you, and then we'll go right into the interview, and hopefully we'll have some viewers joining us live and ask some questions, and if not, we're going to roll with it. So
That's good.
great. Without further ado, it's time to introduce our guest. He's got a BS from the University of Illinois in Chicago, an MDiv from Moody Theological Seminary. He got his MA in Biblical Exegesis from Wheaton College, and he did his doctoral studies in Theological Studies in Old Testament at Trinity Evangelical Divinity Society. He's been the chairman of the board of the FCA Chicagoland's Courageous Leadership Training and a member of the Evangelical Theological Society from 2006 onward. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the VP of Moody Distance Learning, Dr. James Spencer. Thanks so much for joining us, James.
Thanks for having me, Vernon. It's good to be here.
So one of the things we want to do on the podcast is really get to know our guest personally. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, and how you got into the position as Dean of Distance Learning Students.
Sure, yeah. I started out my college career looking to go into medicine, and just realized that wasn't the path that I really wanted to take. Was floundering a bit, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and was working as a personal trainer. A couple of gentlemen who were discipling me suggested that I go to seminary. I think they were a little tired of dealing with me. They thought I was a little stubborn and didn't think I had much to go on. So they decided that seminary would be a good place for me. So I actually looked around. I found Moody. It was about 4 blocks away from where I was working at the time. Hopped into my MDiv degree and just really fell in love with theological education. Met some professors, specifically Walt McCord, my second year. And he really is the one who suggested that I go on for further study. I was planning on doing the pastoral track, and he really saw in me the propensity for academic work. And so as I finished up my MA and my PhD, you start looking for jobs. My wife was wondering if I was ever going to work or whether I was just going to be a perpetual student. And I found a job. It was assistant dean of online and non-traditional education, and I've been teaching adults for several years as an adjunct faculty member for Moody, and then for a couple other colleges. And I thought, well, this could be a good fit. So I applied. I got the job, and so the rest is history. I was promoted 2 years ago to the position of vice president dean of Moody Distance Learning, and been here ever since.
That's awesome. Did you always have a desire to go into ministry eventually?
Not really. After I got the job with as assistant dean, I was really headed straight toward academic administration. I actually, in one of my interviews, some of the faculty members asked me why someone with my academic background would want to go into higher education administration as opposed to being a faculty member.
Sure.
And I said, I think I've just come to believe that leading a school and creating new programs and really leading a faculty is the best theological work that I'll ever do. Forget writing the journal articles, forget writing the books. This is really where I feel I can do my best theological work. So.
And so, as you kind of progressed into that, did you begin to really have a love for it, or do you still have somewhat of an interest in business and some of the other things related to ministry?
Yeah, I really, when people ask me that, obviously I think I have a desire and an interest in the business side of things and making sure that things work. But at the end of the day, what I really want to do is graduate students from our programs and make sure that they're sound theologically, that they understand how to interpret Scripture, and that they can bridge with those skills out into ministry and really make sure that churches or ministries are doing the right things from a biblical and theological perspective. I mean, the real passion behind the whole thing isn't about the business. It's not about increasing enrollments or anything like that. It's really about sending students out to change the world one community at a time. Yeah,
that's really neat. Now, as you're in the position now, I know there's a lot that you deal with, especially being the vice president of Moody Distance Learning. So how do you handle the stress of all that? I mean, how do you love your family well and do well in your job and also cater to the students?
Yeah.
What are some tips on being able to be more productive and proficient?
Yeah, I mean, part of my life is obviously my family. I have a wife. We've been married for 15 years, and then I have 3 kids. I have a 9-year-old son, and I have twin girls. They're 5. And so they're all in school now. We've got all the activities. My son's on a swim team, and so finding that right balance has been difficult. I'll admit. I think the important part is, to realize, what to say no to. and really understand who I am as a person, where I'm headed, and decide what activities to do and what activities not to do. About a year ago, I went through an activity related to personal branding, and there's nothing magical about personal branding. It's really just a nice way to get a little bit more self-aware and try to understand what your trajectory is, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and where you'd really like to go with your life. I mean, investigating what God has given you and understanding where God is taking you is always an important thing, no matter what vehicle you use to do that. So I found that helpful because then it gives me sort of a grid to say, yeah, I want to do this activity, but I don't want to do this one. You know, I want to do these things, but I don't want to do these things. And part of what came out of that was that I really do want to be a good, strong husband and father. I mean, I want people to see me as that. I want to actually be that, have that substance there. So, yeah, I think it's just about understanding what roles you play, how you play them, and then making sure that you're being efficient with your time. At least that's the way I've done it. Making sure I don't take on things that just really don't fit where I'm going.
Yeah. That's really neat. Understanding where God's taking you and knowing that maybe something doesn't fit into that, even though it might be something you enjoy.
Right.
But what about? I remember when I was a student, and there was hard because I didn't know exactly where God was going to take me, and I didn't know where I was going. And so, how do you learn to say no to things even if you don't know where God is taking you yet? Yeah.
You know, I think there's a couple ways that I would suggest that students do this. Because for students, you're right, the volunteer opportunities are always there.
Right.
Whether you go to Moody and they want to tie into the ministry somehow. And I think it takes a good degree of discipline to really take a step back and say, before I volunteer, I'd like to figure out where I should volunteer. It really won't be a question. Most of our students want to volunteer, or either that or they're already involved in ministry. And so, you know, being able to say, you know, I'm not going to answer this right now. I'm going to delay this question, right? I'm going to delay my answer and say, I want to talk to somebody in youth ministry. I want to talk to somebody in children's ministry. I want to talk to an executive pastor. I want to talk to, you know, whoever this is. Because as you understand what makes other people good at their jobs, and as you understand, you know, why they're good at this ministry, why they went into it, what sort of characteristics they have, and how you might fit with them, you begin to understand where you might align within the church and really strategically think through, okay, where's best for me to volunteer? At the end of the day, you know, I've had a number of volunteer positions as well. I was actually a junior high pastor for a couple of years, and anyone who knows me knows that they would never voluntarily put me in a junior high setting. Temperament is just not with the junior hires. I'm not a nutty, crazy, silly guy. And you know, it takes that with junior hires, especially junior high boys. So I volunteer into that position, but God uses it, right? He's going to use anything that you volunteer for, and so even if you find yourself in a situation where you're saying, "Well, James, that's great advice, but I'm already volunteering in 6 places," right? You want to keep in mind, okay, asking yourself, well, I may not be volunteering in the right place, but at the end of the day, God is going to do the right thing to me. And you want to be watching out for that all the time. You know, how is God trying to change and shift me in order to take me where He'd ultimately like me to go, regardless of what decisions I've made?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's important to keep in mind, too. Not so much, you know, what do I say no to? But sometimes, you know, the opposite question, what do we say yes to? Do we say yes to stretching opportunities where we might not think we're going in that direction, but we really, you know, we really feel God calling us into this? Or do we say, you know, yes to just the things that we know we want to do and just follow our own direction there? And all that can be a really difficult balance, because all we're really trying to do is be faithful to what God's given us and to live our lives without reserve and without regret in service of Him.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. So learning what to say no to and even what to say yes to and where God's leading you, the next question really is, how do you take your degree that you're getting at MBIDL, and what do you say yes to in terms of, you're looking down the road at a job, at a ministry job probably.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for that while you're in school?
You know, I think this is one of the biggest things that I wish people would have told me when I was going through my education. I had this misplaced assumption that when I finished my degrees, there would be jobs open for me. And I think that just simply isn't the case. I don't know that it ever was the case, really. What I came to at the end of my career as a student was that I had not sufficiently worked on the relationships I needed to get jobs. So I had proven myself academically. I was actually a fairly strong student, but I didn't know anybody, and nobody else really knew that about me. And
Sure.
I hadn't really created those networks to say, okay, I'd like to be, a faculty member, or I'd like to be an administrator, or I'd like to go into ministry, or whatever I'd like to do. I didn't have anyone that I could really go to and talk to. My relationships were very limited, and when that happens, you're obviously limited to whatever the people you have relationships with happen to have open at the time. And so what I think I would encourage students to do, and we've actually built this into the curriculum in our new revision, we have students think through where they want to go, and then who they really would like to get to know, and who they'd like to have get to know them in order to go there. It's an extremely important part of higher education today, not just to learn while you're in school, but to leverage the fact that you're a student, right?
Yeah, sure.
Everybody wants to help a student. You could call, if you want to go into youth ministry or, be an associate pastor of some sort or whatever, you can shoot emails out, you can give calls out to folks who are in children's ministry or who are associate pastors, and they'll talk to you. And they'll talk to you about where you're headed and what you want to do. And so you can start developing that network, start developing relationships with people who are already in ministry, and then hopefully that leads to higher possibilities of you getting jobs afterwards.
So as the students are learning, the real opportunity is being able to reach out. But
Absolutely.
in their own communities, they're spread all across the world, really. Where do they begin doing that?
Yeah, I think you have to start where you are. Have to. And I think that, pastors are notorious for liking to help people, right? You very seldom find a pastor who doesn't want to help anyone. And so I think, if students just reach out to their pastors or a friend who's a pastor or, whoever they happen to be connected with there in their local area and talks through, hey, this is where I really see myself headed. This is where I'd like to see myself go. And have that real critical conversation and have that person help you map out, okay, if you really want to go do this, you need to probably look at going here and doing this, and let's develop skills here. And let's make sure you're ready to really take that next step. Because so much in ministry, we care about competence in ministry, right? We want our pastors to be able to preach the Word of God well. We want them to be able to, administrate the church and handle the budget and lead whatever team they have underneath them. But probably most important for us is the character aspect. We actually want to know that someone is going to be relationally healthy with people and have strong Christian character and be growing in their relationship with Christ. And those are the kind of intangible things that unless you have a relationship with someone that you've actually developed and you have this network of people who see you and they say, not only is this person competent and able, he's also full of character and integrity. We would trust him to shepherd this ministry. Unless you have that, it's going to be much more difficult for you to get over the hump and get that job, ministry position that you're really seeking, because so much of it is about these people aren't just giving you a position, they're giving you a people. And that's a very, very different thing that you're being entrusted with after school.
Right. It's so easy to come into school thinking that the degree is going to be the ticket to the job, but really to be successful, you really have to get out and make those connections.
You really do.
You can supplement that because of your learning, but being able to get out there and make those connections, like you said, in your local community. And I think what's so neat about the students that are in distance learning is they all have different communities.
Yeah.
They're not all tapping into the same pastors. They get their own local community pastors. And yeah, really neat. We're doing this show live, and so if you're listening to this podcast, we'd love for you to join us live on Tuesdays. And if you are live, I'd love for you guys to join in and ask questions. We're here, and we'd love for James to be able to answer any of those questions that you do have. James, as a lot of the changes come through Moody Distance Learning, I think it can be a little confusing. So I wondered if you might be able to touch on some of the changes that are coming to Moody Bible Institute Distance Learning and what that means for the student.
Sure. Let me start with what we're passionate about. And we want to see students graduate out into ministry. We want to see them be as successful as they possibly can be studying in our program. And then after our program, really demonstrating that what we train them to do, they do well. And so that's what we're really passionate about, is seeing our students go out into ministry. We really do want to see them impact the world one community at a time. And so we've made some changes with that end in mind. So some of the changes we've made specifically are the curricular revisions. We changed our Bachelor of Science in Biblical Studies and our Bachelor of Science in Ministry Leadership. And we did so to help students continue through the program more effectively. So we took our program and we divided it out instead of saying, well, our students really walk through these programs thinking freshman, sophomore, junior, senior.
Yeah, right, but they don't, yeah.
Yeah, not really. I mean, they usually take a little longer. They're studying part-time. They don't have clean breaks necessarily within the curriculum where they can say, hey, I reached the end of my freshman year. This is great. Now I just do sophomore, junior, senior, and I'm done. Our students don't have that. They don't think like that, right? So what we did was we blocked our courses into units and said, these are going to be your milestones across the curriculum. And we did 7 or 8 of them, depending on your degree program. So that what we can do is really focus with students on saying, okay, in this unit, we're going to focus on you learning the scriptures. In this unit, we're going to focus on you preparing for collegiate level success. So that means writing, means critical thinking, means some self-exploration kind of things. In this unit, we're going to do understanding ancient and modern times. And we're really going to get into culture and what that looked like, and some of the ancient Near Eastern backgrounds of the Old Testament, Second Temple Jewish backgrounds of the New Testament. So now you can incorporate some of that in. But these units are set up so that students can kind of enter them or exit them a little bit more on a part-time basis, but they can still see a progression in their learning all the way across the curriculum. And what we want to do is students enter those and finish those. We want to have, we want to orient them to what they're coming into, and then we want to celebrate with them in the back end of that. Because when they finish those units, they have done some significant learning that we want to recognize and that they need to acknowledge to understand what they've just accomplished. So that's a big part of the changes.
Explain to me, a unit consists of how many classes, roughly?
Yeah, usually around 6 or 7. I think we limited it around 6 or 7. And I'll just explain one of the units to you. For instance, the first one, learning the scriptures. So what we did, we took a class called Foundations for Learning, which will really help students understand how they need to learn online, right? How they need to learn online, how they need to learn in our program, what our program looks like, and then some good study techniques and those kind of pieces to really set them off on the right foot on how to learn online, right? Because it is a different animal than learning in class. Most people take it in class before, but they haven't necessarily taken it online, so it's a really important course. Then they walk through 4 classes on Old Testament and New Testament, right? And there we deal with genre and themes and what does the Old Testament say, and what's some of the history there? What's the New Testament say, and what's some of the history there? And how does all that work? And then we move to a class that's called Story and Structure of the Bible, where we ask them to kind of put it all together, right? So they've had these 4 classes in Old Testament and New Testament, and then Story and Structure, what they do is they say, okay, starting with the Old Testament, coming into the New Testament, how do these things fit? What does that look like? And so by the end of that unit, not only do they know how to learn online, which sets them up for success in the rest of the program, they also have a really strong grounding in the scriptures. They know how to read and interpret any type of genre in the scripture, and they have a broad storyline of scripture so that they understand how to fit other things within that. So that's an example of one learning unit, and then they would kind of move on to the next.
That's great. So rather than being labeled as a freshman, you would be able to say, I got an understanding in the Old Testament by going through these 6 courses, and you might even be able to explain that a little bit better. So as you go through the course, you can really see where you're going and where you've come from, right?
Right. Yep.
That's really neat. And I think it really benefits the student as far as where they're coming from, where they're learning. Because like you said, online students, most of them have either a family or a full-time job that they're doing. So like you said, they're not going through it like a normal college student would.
Correct. And that is another change that we're making, actually. As we design our courses, we're working through all the courses to try to make sure that the workloads are even across every week so that students don't have to guess as to how much time they're going to need in any given week, right? So maybe week 1 you do essentially no work, then in week 2 you're 40 hours. We're not trying to do that with students because we know that students need to balance their work responsibilities and their family life with their education. And the best way that we can help them to do that is to be consistent, so they know what to expect from us. And so we're working through all of our courses and redesigning them to make sure that we've got consistent workloads across all of our courses across the entire program so that the students can plan on, okay, this is about the amount of work I'm going to have throughout the entire program, and this is what I can expect. And we're hoping that that'll help students manage their time a little bit more easily, because we're not throwing any surprises at them.
Yeah, sure, that makes total sense, and I think it really benefits the student overall as far as where they're coming from. I also want to mention, if you are watching us live, there is a page on our website, mbidl.com/live, but you'll want to click through to the Google event to leave a comment. So when you actually go to the Google event on our Moody Distance Learning page, you'll be able to see that there's a comment section when you play the video, and you're able to type in your comment or your question. We'd love to be able to answer that on the show live. So again, we're talking with Dr. James Spencer, the Vice President of Moody Distance Learning. And it's been really neat to hear, because we talked a lot about productivity, learning how to better balance our lives, and then some of the changes that are going on at MDL and what that means for the student. One thing I wanted to talk a little bit about further was the student as learner, because we have students all over the world, and it's incredibly neat to be able to see how a student living in Canada or living in Europe can participate in a class from all over. But I know you have a theory called the student as learner, so I want you to explain for us a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, before I explain the theory, let me just tell kind of why it came up in my mind in the first place. When I was a student in the seminary, I had a gentleman in my systematic theology class. We were going through a lecture on the sovereignty of God, and the professor got done sort of waxing philosophical on the sovereignty of God, and this gentleman from Africa raises his hand and says, "I don't understand the sovereignty of God." And so the professor reiterates, kind of what he said in the lecture, and the student says, "I still don't understand it." And so, I'm sitting there in my arrogant first-year MDiv stature saying, how does this guy not get this? This is the simplest concept in the world, right? So that tells you how ignorant I was at that point. He tells the story about his wife and his kids, African soldiers that came into his house. They held him at gunpoint. They beat his kids and they abused his wife. And then he says, "I don't understand the sovereignty of God." And in that moment, what I realized was that my entire understanding of theological education was wrong. It was just totally wrong. I had a whole different meaning attached to it than I needed to have attached to it. And from that moment on, what theological education really began to mean to me was something that I could take and put out on the ground. That theology happened in the slop and the mess. It didn't happen just in the textbooks and the clean environment of the classroom. It was a messy business. And I think that ties into my understanding of learners. Because learners aren't just people that we fill with knowledge, right? We're not just trying to convey information to people. We're not just trying to get them to reproduce specific skills. That is definitely part of what we're trying to do, right? Part of what we're trying to do is, as learners interface with us, we want the systems that we're using to be easy to use, right? We'd love to have them, pull into Blackboard,
right.
And no problem. We want them to be able to think certain things when they leave, right? We do want to convey information to them, but a lot of times what I think we ignore is that learners are also storytellers, right? They're going to take this information that they get, and they're going to have this experience with us, and they're going to tell a story about that, right? That has a renewed meaning tied to it. What is theological education for you? What does it really look like? Was it just an information dump, or was it something much more powerful than that? And I want our students going out and saying, no, it was much more powerful than that. Let me tell you what it was, right? I think students are also creative, right? Learners, they're so creative. I always have this fear when we're creating a curriculum that we're boxing students in too much, right? We're determining things just too much. And so building in and helping our learners be more creative and giving them more space to do things that they want to do and that they have an interest in. I have a real passion for that within the curriculum, and I think that engages the learner in a different way than we're doing now. So we've got some initiatives in place where we really are trying to loosen that up and allow students to exercise that creativity, bring that to the table. And then finally, for us, our learners are witnesses. We're actually sending them out not to be witnesses of Moody's education. I mean, that's great. We want our graduates to represent us and represent us well. But at the end of the day, Moody means so much less than Christ does. And these students are going to witness for Christ in their world. And we want them to be of sufficient character and competence to do so. And so we have to design our programs and interact with our students in such a way that we truly respect the fact that they are going to go out as witnesses. And really demonstrate that we are committed to that we want them to do that and do that well, and to treat them as such. And so that's kind of the round understanding that I have of students as learners. We really want to look at them from just the user perspective. When they pull in, can they do things easily? From the creative perspective, what could they do if we'd only let them? From the storytelling perspective, what are they going to say? How are they going to talk about this theological education thing that they've done? And finally, learners of witness, which is really the most important one, in demonstrating Christ to the world.
That's really neat. And I'm going to be sure to put some of those notes up on our show page, and you can catch those notes at mbidl.com/1 as in the number 1 for episode 1. So you can catch those online. And it's just really neat to hear how excited you are about students, because I think it's so neat that we have students all over the place. And someone can look at it as being away from everyone or being disconnected, but I think the value that those students can bring, like you said, in the creativity and the witness, can really benefit the entire school and the entire classroom.
Absolutely. It's such an advantage.
That's great. We do have one question from an audience member.
Great.
Andrew Beatty asked, we recently got rated on Udumedic, I think is how you pronounce their name. Udumedic, yeah. On their affordable online schools, and we actually got, I was looking up here, we got number 9. And so he asked if you could explain a little bit about what that means for Moody Distance Learning.
Yeah, Edudemic is a outside entity. We didn't apply for anything with them. They really survey a number of colleges across the country. They looked at our information. They looked at our programs. They actually evaluated based on cost. Obviously, it's an affordable program, but on quality areas. And some of the quality areas they look at, for instance, number of degrees offered, breadth of degrees offered. Those kind of things we really would have fallen short on, and so for us to have scored in the top 10 is really great. But yeah, they look at a number of different quality factors as well as our cost and affordability, and so it was a really great surprise to find out that we made the list, and that Edudemic thinks highly of what we're doing.
Yeah, really neat. And I'll be sure to put a link in the show notes again, and you can find those at mbidl.com/1, the number 1. And you can see the link for that list there. So, well, we're coming to the end here, James, but we do something at the end. It's called the Final 4. This is where we ask the same 4 questions to every single guest, and we're just looking for your immediate response.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Perfect. If you could study anywhere in the world, where would it be?
I've always wanted to study in Italy. Rome, I think, would be just a fantastic place to go and study and chill and have some Italian food.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Italian coffee with the Colosseum behind you.
That's right. Starbucks there, right?
That's right. What was your first college major?
My first college major was actually chemistry, which was fantastic until they stuck me in a basement and made me play with chemicals. It was just not going to work for me. But yeah, first college major was chemistry.
Awesome. If you could have one figure from church history as an MDL professor, who would it be?
Augustine. Easy.
Augustine.
Yeah, love the Confessions, love the way he integrates his own life with his theology. I think that's what we do here. We integrate life and theology and online. And so I think Augustine would be perfect for an online professor.
Has he made a big influence in your life and his writings?
He really has. I've read a lot of his stuff, and he is fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, and the last question. If you were stranded on a desert island and you could take one movie, what would it be?
The easy answer is Castaway. I think I'd actually go with Rocky. I'm a diehard Rocky fan. So Rocky 1, the best Rocky.
The best Rocky.
Desert Island, yes.
There it is. Well, again, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show, James. It was a huge pleasure. Just being able to chat, hear your story, and some of the changes that are going on at MBIDL. So
great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again, James. Take care.
Take care.